Welcome to Teal Talk, a podcast brought to you by the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. That's OAESV for short. We're your hosts, Taylor
and Lori.
In each episode, we speak with professionals in the field to dive deep into the intersectional issues that affect survivors in Ohio.
Before we begin, we want to give a content warning that we will be discussing sexual violence and other issues that may be upsetting and triggering. If you need help, please feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. Please take care of yourself. Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening to you, wherever or whenever you're tuning in today. I'm Lori Hamami, Communications and Content Coordinator at OAESV. My co-host Taylor Ucker-Laudeman is unable to join us today, so you'll be hearing from me and our wonderful guest, Gulnar Feerasta, today. Gulnar is the Senior Director of Programs at the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland. She is passionate about promoting empowerment, resiliency, and leadership throughout marginalized communities. With advocacy and outreach at the forefront of her vision, her goal is to build strong support systems while improving the quality of life through long-term policy and social change. She lived and studied in New Zealand, Australia, and South Korea before pursuing her bachelor's degree in management and international business from the University of Akron. She then obtained a dual master's degree in applied social sciences with a focus on community practice for social change and nonprofit management from Case Western Reserve University. Gulnar, would you mind telling our listeners some more information about you, about the center, and your role? And also, I personally want to hear all about your travels. That's amazing. You've lived in 3 countries.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Lori. I'm so excited to be here. I'm happy to share a little bit more about myself. So Gulnar Feerasta, I use she, they pronouns. And as Lori mentioned, I am the Senior Director of Programs at the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland. I get to work with an amazing, outstanding group of local queer leaders. And we work together to serve the needs of our very diverse community. Our mission at the center is to educate, advocate, support, and celebrate the LGBTQ plus community in Northeast Ohio. And we do that through a myriad of different programs, including our direct programs. When we talk about that, we talk about our 3 core programs. One is Rainbow Pioneers, which serves folks that are 50 years and older who identify as LGBTQ plus or as allies. We have a youth program called QU, which includes a drop-in program, a leadership institute, queer youth ambassadors, queer prom, that's coming up on June 10th at Near West Theater, and a youth research cohort that is doing research around creating social change. And that's in partnership with the Thrive Collaborative at CSU. And then we have our programming for trans and gender diverse folks. We have one that's called Trans U, that is for young individuals, 11 to 20 years old, and it's completely virtual. It meets once a week, and it's to provide support and build community for young trans and gender diverse folks, and that is run in collaboration with our partners at Colors Plus Youth Center. And then Trans Plus, which is for folks that are 18 and older who identify as either transgender or gender diverse, and that group meets twice a week here at the center. All of our programs are open and free to the community. They all follow a peer education and peer support model. So in addition to those core programs, we have a lot of different partnerships and collaborations through which we serve our community. Two of the main ones that I love talking about are the School of One, which is in partnership with Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And I'm always very proud to share that we are the first and the only one of its kind in the nation where there is a public school located within the premises of an LGBTQ organization. And so that is always thrilling to share and talk about this innovative model for really supporting and serving LGBTQ plus youth, ensuring that they also have equitable access to education and educational resources, and a whole host of affirming wraparound services. And then our other partnership is Metro Health Pride Clinic. So we have a Pride Clinic on site. It is the only one that's out in the community in terms of providing care in community outside of a medical or healthcare facility. Anybody can come in and get an appointment and get access to it. It provides the whole range of primary care services, preventive care services, and gender affirming care for folks who need it. In addition to that, we have a really robust volunteer and community engagement program and education and advocacy program through which we do a lot of training and workshops and education sessions for employers, for community organizations, for schools, etc., which is a lot. I know that was like a whole bunch of stuff that we do.
I was going to say, what don't you do? As I was listening to you talk, I was like, wow, they are reaching every age, every kind of person, and that's amazing. I feel like a lot of programs are pointed at specific age groups, but one of the first programs you mentioned is for persons 50 plus. I don't know what the average age of, someone coming into their own skin or coming out is, but I can assume it's probably later in life.
Yeah. I mean, at least for our elders, right? Like when we think about them, this is like the cohort that has lived and survived the AIDS epidemic, lived and survived through tremendous social change. I mean, when they were our age, they were forced to stay closeted. It wasn't safe for them to be out and open and live into their authenticity. And so what we've seen more with that cohort is folks that have come out as transgender later in life. And that's been really interesting around learning how to serve and support them because, right now we hear a lot about youth that are trans and gender diverse, but we don't hear so much about older adults having a similar journey or going through a similar process around, living into their authentic selves. So yeah, it's really important. And to your point about doing a variety or having diverse ranges of types of programming and serving the gamut across the life spectrum in terms of age, I think that's something that's very unique about the LGBT Center. We also find that LGBT centers themselves often have specific focuses. And this is not all, but many LGBT centers are usually really very medical focused or healthcare focused, or they'll be very subpopulation specific. So whether it'll be just a youth center, or it might be just a center for older adults, or just a center for trans and gender diverse people. And here we're sort of reaching across that spectrum of identity, which I think is really important, especially in Ohio and especially in a place like Northeast Ohio, where there aren't a lot of LGBTQ plus resources, right? We're very intentional about the programs that we do because we don't want to be duplicative. But what we've done is we've looked at where the gaps are, right? So there's a host of senior centers, for example. Just in Cuyahoga County, there are 75. But none of them are specifically looking to serve the unique needs of LGBTQ plus elders, right? There's only one, and that's at the center. Same thing with trans and gender diverse programs and supports. There are grassroots organizations that are mostly affinity groups, but in terms of a program that is supported by the infrastructure and capacity and resources, there's only one in all of Northeast Ohio, and that's at the center. Same thing with our youth program. And, where there are needs that are sort of intersectional, we like to partner with the community. I love to talk about our collaborative partnerships. I think that if somebody asks me, what is the core competency of the center? we have several, but I would say one of our core competencies is collaboration and partnership. For example, we know about the barriers and gaps around educational needs, right? So that's a collaborative partnership. The healthcare partnerships that we have with Metro Health Pride Clinic, but also Cleveland Clinic and and, partnering together to do like cross programming to serve the needs of the community. So we try to be very intentional because we also know that resources and capacity is limited and you can't be all things to all people. But where we can't provide those things, we convene the space and convene the partners to be able to provide those things to the community in a community setting. Yeah, we have a lot going on, but it's all good things. And, we really see ourselves as a hub. And the community sees us as a hub, like a one-stop place that they can go, get connected to what they need, whether it's housing or food or transportation, whatever it is. They don't have to run around to multiple places in order to be able to get those needs met.
I think that last point that you made, it being a one-stop shop, not having to, call this person, see this person, talk to this person, is awesome, because reaching out in the first place for any kind of help is already scary. And then being told, hey, you also have to share what you just shared with me with like 3 or 4 other people.
Those people may or may not be affirming. They may or may not have the training to be able to support queer people, to have sort of that cultural humility or competence. So as much as we can, we try to make sure that people don't have to jump through hoops to get what they need.
Yeah, that's so true.
I mean, it also comes from this recognition that we are not experts in all things either. And so what we would rather do is work with those partners that are wanting to serve the entire community and be like, hey, there's things that we can learn from you. And what you can learn from us is how to truly serve all members of the community, because that is what you do, that you serve all members of the community. So like, that's really important.
Something I didn't mention in the beginning, but I should mention now, is the reason we're even speaking with you today is because June is Pride Month. And I'm sure you are running around like a chicken with your head cut off, planning all sorts of wonderful things. I'd love to hear what events you are hosting during Pride. And I'm also wondering, is Pride Month the largest outreach event for your organization? Do you tend to get a lot of new clientele?
Yeah. So Pride, I love Pride. I'm so glad you asked about Pride. This is our second Pride back since COVID. Last year was the first one. We had such a great response. We're anticipating a similar number of people coming to this year's Pride. So this year, we're actually really excited that we were able to partner with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So on June 1st, we're doing a community kickoff at the Rock Hall Plaza. It's one of our more family and youth-oriented sort of kickoff events. So there's going to be performances by the School of Rock, Near West Theater, and other local queer bands and art performers. Pride for us is a community pride. And so we always want to make sure that we are lifting up and bringing visibility and celebrating local artists and local performers. And so that'll happen from 5 to 9 at the Rock Hall Plaza. And then on Friday is sort of the traditional kickoff with the bars and different nightlife venues. And then on Saturday, June 3rd, is the actual march and festival. Often people say, like, isn't that a parade? No, we do not do a parade. We're very intentional about doing a march. For us, Pride is a movement, not a moment. And by having a march, we are honoring the movement. We're honoring the roots of the Pride movement, the movement for LGBTQ rights and equality. It started with the protest.
And language matters, right?
Language does matter. And we want to stay true to those values. And while there have been great strides that have been accomplished, we are still in the fight for our rights. We are still fighting for equality. And especially right now, when there is just such a slew, over 400 anti-LGBT, anti-trans bills out there in the different states. I believe there's about 4 or 5 here in Ohio. We can't forget that. And so honoring that, remembering that, reminding people that this is a movement. And yes, we are here to celebrate, and we'll do that during the festival, but we want to honor the movement. So we start up with that march at 11 a.m. We have great entertainment lined up this year for the main stage. We also have a speak out stage. So anybody is welcome to have 5 minutes on the stage to, share their message, to mobilize people, bring people together, to organize around issues that are really important, such as reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, Black lives, poverty, all of those things, right? And this is a great way to reach people. We'll have a health and wellness village, so different healthcare providers will be there. Some will be providing free preventive screenings and services. Cuyahoga County Board of Health will be there doing vaccinations for COVID and monkeypox. Then there's like a youth and family space with lots of arts and crafts and games and all of those things. And so the festival runs till about 6 p.m. And then there's an official after party at Studio West 117 over here on the west side. Really excited. A lot of fun things planned. Last year, we had 15,000 people in the march, and then another like 20 to 22,000 at the festival. We're anticipating similar numbers this year, constantly feeling like, did we miss something? Did we miss something? But, it'll be great. We have great volunteers. We have a great community, and they're always out to support. And we deeply, deeply value and appreciate and love that.
Yeah. I'm wondering, you mentioned the, slew of legislation kind of making us all feel a little heavy right now. Have you noticed there's an increase in the number of allies who are reaching out to the center, wanting a way to help or be involved?
Yeah, I think that we've been very fortunate that, we have strong community support, and we've been fortunate that we have a large group of allies in the community. We have seen an increase in sort of outreach, and people are getting activated everywhere, even if it's not directly reaching to the center. There's a lot happening on social media. The last 2 drag story hours that have happened at Near West Theater, and there was concerns about protesters showing up, and then a group of counter protesters showed up, the Parasol Patrol, with their rainbow umbrellas and walking kids and families in so they don't have to walk through the crowd of anti-LGBT protesters. And it's been really great to see that. And, to have partners like Near West that are standing with us, that are refusing to be bullied into not being inclusive, right? We really appreciate those partners. So it's not just, allies individually, but it's also organizational allies. And I'm hoping that we continue to see that sort of permeate outside of the current, group of organizations, and continue to mobilize and build into larger support for the LGBTQ plus community. Because, it's not just our rights that are at stake, right? Reproductive rights are also queer rights. Queer rights are also reproductive rights. There's so much crossover. An example that I like to give around care for trans youth and making that unlawful, even if parents have given consent. And, there's been talks about puberty blockers. Research studies and research have shown that during COVID and post-COVID, the number of young girls that are experiencing precocious puberty, so early puberty, getting their periods at like 7, 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, which is not healthy for them developmentally. It's not good for their bodies. It's not good for their mental health also. What is the treatment for that? The treatment for that is puberty blockers, right? So now if you are banning things like puberty blockers, it's not just LGBT or trans kids that are not going to be able to access this essential care. It is also other swaths of the population that are also going to lose out. And so we cannot forget that, just because on the surface it may not directly affect us, that there isn't unintended impact and consequences permeating outward into the larger community and population.
I feel like nearly everything has a ripple effect, and sometimes people are only looking at the surface. and not thinking of the domino effect that's going to follow if one thing gets banned.
Right. Right. And we often hear like politicians talk about, emphasizing economics and emphasizing jobs and growth and things like that. And I also see supporting queer people and ensuring that Ohio remains a welcoming and safe and affirming space for all people is directly connected to also economics. When we talk about talent development and talent retention, right? The most recent youth risk behavior survey from last year showed that 25.5% of high school age students in Cuyahoga County identify as LGBTQ plus, whether that's orientation, whether that's identity, whether they're questioning, 25.5%. You could do some extrapolations, make some assumptions. You could maybe narrow that 25.5% down to 20% if you're thinking general population terms. And even if right now they're not able to vote or, impact public policy, in 4 years at the most, they'll all be 18 or over 18. And this is 20% of Cuyahoga County, right? Are we going to make it impossible for 20% of our county's population to live and thrive in our county, in our city? What would the economic impact of that be if they left? Because they cannot live here, they cannot thrive here, that they cannot access the care that they need, the services that they need. What does that mean in terms of economic impact and retaining talent?
Mic drop. I'm just like snapping over here. Yes, and I think this also ties into what you mentioned earlier about being in the schools and can you mention that again? The center being one of the only...
Yeah, so we're the only LGBT community center that has a public school campus located within its premises. And so the school serves grades 9 through 12. It has rolling enrollment throughout the year, and it's open to all. But the specific focus here is, of course, creating a safe and inclusive environment for all youth, including LGBTQ plus youth, and making sure that they have the supports and wraparound services that they need.
Yeah. And did you mention that you do some type of educational programming in K through 12?
Yes, there's several different ways in which we do that. So, of course, we have our drop-in program, which is after school here, but we also provide programming for after school in a couple of the CMSD schools. And we also support around helping school-based GSAs or gay straight alliances, pride groups, they have different names, around that, helping to get those up and running or facilitating them depending on what the different schools need. Here at the school at the center, we do programming every other week during school time to, support the students, to build community, get them connected to what they need. We utilize curriculum content from our Leadership Development Institute that is delivered during that time. We do a lot of consultation. So we'll get calls from parents, we'll get calls from teachers, principals around different things that they're encountering and looking for support. And more recently, we've developed a curriculum for comprehensive health and wellness and sexual reproductive education that particularly takes into account the needs of queer youth. There's been research done that shows that, of all the curriculums that are out there available nationally that are utilized by schools, none of them really take into account or even address queer identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, and some of those aspects around what does reproductive health care look like in that case? What does that look like in interpersonal relationships? So we've created a curriculum in collaboration with the Thrive Collaborative at CSU and developed a evidence-based curriculum that meets the standards, the National Sex Education Standards and the CDC and NIH standards around what curriculum should look like, what should be included, and all of that. And we also incorporated youth voice. It's been informed by the needs of the youth, and we have like a diverse range of community stakeholders, about 40 of them, ranging from medical professionals to mental health professionals to educators to community partners that serve youth, to ensure its efficacy, right? And right now it's being piloted with different groups of youth, including some of the youth at School of One. And we're really excited and eager to get their feedback and adjust the curriculum as the feedback recommends, and have this available to the community, because it's not just about sex ed, right? Like, that's a very small part of like health and wellness. It's more about, okay, what does navigating the healthcare system look like? We're talking about physiology, we're talking about anatomy, we're talking about advocating for yourself as you navigate the healthcare system, how to identify and find resources, talking about literacy. We know youth find a lot of stuff online. We know that they exchange a lot of information with each other. So how do you like utilize that information, but in a way that is critical and that is reflective, right? Like intentionally trying to make sure that, okay, is this information real? Is it accurate? So teaching those types of media literacy skills, and then interpersonal relationships, talking about intimacy. And, intimacy is not just limited to sexual relationships. We have intimate relationships with the people in our lives all the time, whether that's our parents, our siblings, our friends, our extended family members, our caregivers, whoever that might be, right? But how do you have relationships that are mutually respectful, that are safe? How do we set boundaries, but not just set them, but maintain them? How do we make sure that we are taking care of our own physical and emotional and mental health as we navigate this really tumultuous time in our development, as we're young people developing into adults, both physically, socially, emotionally, mentally. And so how do you do that in a way that keeps you safe, that gives you the autonomy to make a well thought out, well informed decision?
I love that so much. I feel like you've been in this work for quite some time and have probably spoken with or heard from people from all walks of life. And I'm just wondering, as we wrap up today, if there's a moment, a conversation, a story that just kind of like made you stop in your tracks, something that really just like clicked a light bulb in your head and you're like, wow, I'm going to remember this one for a while.
Oh gosh, there are several. Some of them are happy stories, some of them not quite. We'll start with the one that's sad and that still sticks with me to this day, and we'll end on a happy note. How's that?
Sounds great.
So it was 7:45 in the evening in November. This was a few years ago, and I still remember it. This individual walks into the center, shoeless, jacketless. It's snowing outside. I mean, this is right around Thanksgiving. They've got bruises. They look like they've been physically hurt. And they come in and they share that they're homeless. They were at a shelter, were assaulted and beaten, sexually and physically assaulted at that shelter. Their belongings got stolen, and they are just trying to get out of this state. They were from out of state. They ended up in Cleveland, thinking that it might be better here, but they were trying to return back to where they came from because things had not worked out here. And at that moment, it's like, where can I send you so that you can be safe tonight? Because at 7:45 in the evening, let me tell you, there's nobody who's going to take your call. Everything's closed, right? And I can't send them back to that same shelter that they just came from. I mean, they're not going to be safe, obviously, because that's what they just experienced. And they're just, afraid out of their mind with fear about having to go back there. That still sticks with me because at least they could come to the center and we were able to sit with them, get them some clothes, get them some food, just hear them out and listen, and tried to call around every single person we could think of that might be able to help. And finally, we do programming out in Lorain County too. And so we reached a pastor at one of the churches that we, have a relationship with, and they arranged for this person to come to Lorain County and stay at a hotel for a couple of days until they could get sorted out and we could figure out a way for them to get back to where they needed to go. It may be sad that our county didn't have resources to support a person in such emergency situation, right? Like no hotel vouchers, no emergency shelter for LGBTQ plus individuals that I could send them to, knowing that they would be safe. So that's one that sticks with me and I think about a lot all the time.
I'm not surprised that story sticks with you. Thank you for sharing that. And for our listeners that don't know, there's a higher risk for people in the LGBTQ plus community to be sexually assaulted or be a victim of domestic abuse and not have anywhere to go.
We see a lot of that. Especially, for me, it all stems around the housing piece, right? Because if you have nowhere safe to live, that's going to impact your ability to get care. That's going to impact your ability to have a job and keep a job. That's going to impact your food security, everything, transportation, everything. And because we don't have LGBTQ plus specific safe housing options, right? Or a, full continuum of housing support. So not just emergency shelter, but long-term permanent supportive housing, because people get vouchers but then they have nowhere to use those vouchers because not all landlords are safe landlords, right? And so people end up out participating in informal or what we call street economies. Some of that includes sex work. In other cases, we see a lot of people engaging in survival sex. So, exchanging sex for basic needs, like to have a place to stay the night, to have food, whatever it is. And sometimes it gets conflated with trafficking, but not all sex work is trafficking. I want to make that really clear. Anybody who is vulnerable, anybody who is is in survival mode because they can't even meet their basic needs, is at high risk for sexual violence, all kinds of violence, but especially sexual violence. And we see that a lot with Black trans women. Cleveland has been named as an epicenter of Black trans violence. The Buckeye Flame did a really great series of 5 articles on this topic a couple of years ago, and it hasn't changed, right? So yeah, the intersection of violence and sexual violence is definitely there with the LGBTQ plus population, and especially BIPOC folks. If our goal or our aim is to eliminate sexual violence, then we have to address the root causes of it and not just put Band-Aids on it, right? And that includes housing. I say the same thing about the HIV epidemic. If you really want to end HIV epidemic, think about housing as prevention, right? Because a lot of times people, those very same people that are being exposed to sexual violence are also being exposed to risk of HIV infection or transmission. And so why aren't we addressing the root cause of why they are ending up in those situations? Predominantly because they're unhoused or they are economically vulnerable. Can't meet their basic needs, just trying to survive. Everybody's just trying to survive.
Yeah. When you mentioned roots and root causes, it reminded me of our conference theme a few years ago was restoring our roots. And I would be remiss if I didn't end this podcast with a shout out that Gulnar is going to be a speaker at our conference this year, Forging New Pathways. If you want to hear more words of wonderful wisdom, we would love to see you there. You can join us for this 3-day experience, June 20th to 22nd. There are 15 workshops to choose from, keynote speakers, a panel, and so many opportunities to network. You can register online at oaesv.org/conference. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person and not just on a little box on the computer.
Same here. Same here. No, thank you for having me. Thank you for thinking of the center and including us. I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I'm very excited to see you all in Columbus in June.
Yay! All good things. I definitely still want to hear that happy story you mentioned before we wrap up.
Yeah, so to end on a slightly more positive note, this has to do with the young person at the School of One. And young person came in one day, bent over in pain, having a hard time walking, completely bruised up. Turned out, again, they're trans. Turns out that parents and family and siblings are not supportive. They've actually been beaten up by their sibling because they were trans. We were just very concerned. They were in so much pain. I was like, oh my God, are you sure you don't have broken ribs or whatever? And because we had the Pride Clinic here, I was immediately able to go to the doctor and say, hey, could you just have a consult with this young person and just let us know if we need to get them to the ER because, there might be something broken. And so they were able to get a consult, figured out that nothing's broken, it's bruised ribs. And we have a great partnership with the gender care program at UH. And the manager of the program was on site because, UH is here on site couple of days a week to do care navigation. And this young person was a few months shy of turning 18. And don't you know, I got them connected to Christina, who's here. So the minute they turned 18, they could get with the affirming care provider, get things in place around gender affirming surgery, mental health referrals, all of those things. Because again, it was happening in real time. That's when people need the support, when they are in those moments of crisis. They don't need to be told, okay, you need to go here and you need to go there. They just need somebody to walk with them through that moment and then be there afterwards to help with the follow-up. And that's exactly what happened. And this young person is thriving and doing so well in school, is an artist, has brought in pieces of art that they've done, and we have them up and displayed around the center. They're brilliant and talented. And, this is, I think, their second year at the School of One. And they talk about how they wouldn't have stayed in school if it hadn't been for the center, if they couldn't have come here. How their parent, who dead named them previously and used the wrong pronouns or even called them it, is now using their chosen name, is beginning to use their pronouns, came to the school open house at the beginning of the academic year, and it was great. So over the course of almost 2 years, we've seen this positive growth and movement and trajectory, and that's what gives me hope. And that is what keeps me passionate about the work that we do. Every day, I am so privileged and so lucky to be able to do this job where I get to be in service. It's not about how many people did you reach? Did you reach 1,000, 3,000, 10,000? It's about these individual lives that you touch, these individual stories where you are making a difference. And that is why, for me, that is what drives me and why we do what we do, right? And it keeps me in a place of gratitude. And what an honor and privilege that is to be able to live in a mindset of gratitude, right?
That's so beautiful, Gulnar. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your experience, and your little nuggets of wisdom with us today. I really appreciate having you on and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Teal Talk. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into intersectional issues affecting survivors in Ohio. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review, recommend us to a friend, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at OAESV and Twitter at Ohio Alliance ESV. If you'd like to learn more about us and the services we offer, sign up for our email list, or read a transcript of this episode, visit oaesv.org.
Want to share a comment or ask a question for a future episode? Just click on the link in the show notes to leave us a voicemail. And remember, we're here to help. Feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. See you next time.